Hi, this is Pat McDonald, your host for Vote for Vermont. Today, no one's joining me. I was going to introduce my co-host, and I realized I'm it. Both Ben and Eric are away and can't join me. But today, our guest is Michael Bielawski, who has been on the show several times before. He's a reporter for True North Reports. And welcome, nice to see you.
It's nice to be back.
Good. He got me so yanked up now I can't even.
I know.
It's like, we got started talking about one of my favorite subjects. But Michael does some great reporting for True North Reports, and I went and captured some of his articles, and we're going to talk about them. So we'll get yanked up about one or two of them for sure.
Sure.
But why don't you tell the viewers a little bit about yourself and a little bit about True North Reports too.
Okay. Well, I'm Michael Bielawski, originally from Albany, New York, Troy, New York. Went down to college around New York City, Seton Hall University. Met my then Korean girlfriend, fiance, lived in Korea for 5 years actually, South Korea and Seoul. Then moved back to upstate New York. Started working for the Hardwick Gazette in about 2014, and that kind of bridged my way to True North Reports, which was then Vermont Watchdog.
Right.
And then Vermont Watchdog, which was a national organization, kind of consolidated,
right.
And the remnants of that Vermont chapter became True North Reports, which actually existed beforehand, but that's getting too much in the weeds.
Yeah, and so. Seton Hall, I remember that because I went to Catherine Gibbs, and we used to go to Seton Hall for dances.
Oh yeah.
To meet folks. So I know Seton Hall pretty well from that aspect, anyway.
It's in my family history. My mother and my grandfather went there.
Oh, nice. That's a great school.
Yeah.
That's a good school. So anyway, you've been pretty busy with when I looked at all of the articles you've written. And if you're interested in any one of the subjects that we're talking about, if you go to True North Reports, type in Michael's name, and good luck spelling it, but you'll see it on the video.
Well, I'm the only news reporter, so if you just click TNR News, chances are you'll get half of them will be my article and half of them will be
because all these articles popped up. So we're just going to go through them one after the other. And
although, if I may add, one more thing about True North Reports, we're growing. We're very happy. We're getting more readers every month.
Great.
And we have, we're growing as a company. We have an advertiser, a commentator, John Clark,
Right.
Probably know. And I'm still the only news writer, and we have the same editor that we've always had and the same publisher that we've always had. So we're growing, small.
Well, no, I love
it's
reading.
exciting to me.
I love reading your stuff too because it's really excellent.
Thanks.
But anyway, so the first article was about Michael Mann. He's the director of Earth System Science Center from Penn State, and he came to Vermont, and it looks like he had a pretty good audience there, but. He's a strong advocate for one of my favorite topics of climate change. And he said in his presentation somewhere that climate change could bring about the end of civilization as we know it. So take it away, Michael. What does he... What was that all about?
Well, he came to Vermont. This is about a year ago, but he came to UVM. And I remember... he had a big crowd. It was that church on the campus, the one with the big seating area. I mean, there must have been hundreds of students there and faculty and whatnot. And it was just, I don't know how many people are familiar with Michael Mann, but he's a personality. He's kind of got, the rhetoric down, rhetoric down. And he, anyway, and you highlighted the phrase that I had in the article, climate change could bring the end of civilization as we know it. And I just, when I saw this question, I got to thinking to a conversation I had with a student in front of the State House also maybe a year ago. It was one of those climate rallies where they all gather and they give speeches about how they're going to support all the new climate legislation. And I was asking one of the students, are you aware that green technology on average cost more than the existing non-green technologies? Now this could be anything from electric cars versus gas-powered cars to solar and wind power versus natural gas and nuclear. The fact of the matter is, whatever you believe is happening to the environment, based on these technologies or pollution. The fact of the matter is these new technologies, these green technologies, still cost more for the utility and hence the ratepayer. And by a long shot, this is not like 10% more, 15% more. This is like, to put it in perspective, wind and solar power, last I checked, they still hover around 9 or 10 cents per kilowatt hour. To put that in perspective, your average like natural gas, oil, nuclear is hovering around half that. And that's factoring in the state and federal subsidies that they continue to get. I believe it's still like a 30% federal subsidy or a tax credit that all the green energy gets. And the reason I'm bringing this up to answer about Michael Mann is he talks to young people and he shares, this rhetoric about how civilization is going to end as we know it. And he's not, I don't think he's giving, and speakers like him are giving the big picture to the students that you're going to have to pay more to do this.
I guess, and in your article you talked, around that time there were 500 scientists who sent a letter to the UN saying, no, we don't believe that climate change is going to happen the way Michael Mann and others say. There will be some change, as there always is, but it's cyclical. And so he never quite mentioned that, I guess.
Well, one of the things he got into a little bit in that speech, I remember, was ClimateGate. ClimateGate is the kind of media term for, I don't know if I'm saying this right, but I think it was East Anglia University over in England. This was like 10 years ago now. But they had a scandal where some of their professors that they were working with on a climate study were exchanging emails with each other. And the language in these emails indicated that there was some mischief going on with the data, where they were like, and I actually meant to have the quote ready for the show and I don't have it in front of me, but if anybody looks up ClimateGate emails, you can find them for yourself and you can read them. And Michael Mann would not, he talked about these emails to this crowd, but he would not read the emails to the crowd. And I found that interesting because he devoted a whole 15 minutes of this speech to talking about how these poor international panel of climate change scientists were poo-pooed in the media and misrepresented in the media, but he would not tell the students what got them in trouble. He would not show them what got them in trouble.
Well, apparently those emails were leaked, right?
They were leaked, yes. They were leaked
so he probably wasn't very happy about that.
Right, of course. But he should still, I think, be able to share or give it. He said the quotes were taken out of context. Well, my thought was, okay, if they're taken out of context, read them the quote and let the students decide. But he wouldn't do that. And anyway, but people like Michael Mann, you can see that they've made an impact on Vermont because we had the Global Warming Solutions Act passed last year.
Right.
And
I want to talk about a little bit later that climate change committee that they put together, which was a rather interesting.
Right, it's like a new little branch of government that doesn't have to
answer.
answer.
Doesn't have to answer at anybody. It's great. So we'll do the next article.
Sure.
Hope you all can keep up with all of this, but this is one near and dear to my heart. The Senate warns of serious damage and system failure of unemployment if the unemployment insurance bill passes. The bill, S10, proposes $50 million unemployment tax increase. Oh, I know, and $600 per week combined with state and federal assistance. And the issue is, when you and it's true, when you give that much money to people, they're not going to kill themselves looking for a job. And we're forever, I don't think they've solved it yet, what they call the benefit cliff.
Right.
Like, why should I take a job if I'm going to lose money from the unemployment insurance, which sort of makes sense. And they were supposed to fix that a long time ago, but I don't think they have. Yeah,
this is a serious deal because again, as you just said, when you start giving people that much money, it creates, I think, a disincentive to work. And I think it may be politically incorrect to say that, but it's maybe the truth.
It's true. Well, would you, seriously, if you got a family to feed and stuff, somebody's giving you $600-700 a week and your job gets you $300-400 a week, hello.
Right, or maybe you find some work where you're paid under the table and you don't necessarily have to report that you got a new job and now you're getting both.
Well, that's probably true, but.
But I made a note here for this question to talk about, I did a story on landlords in Vermont because they're having a related problem to this matter. I interviewed Larry Hamill from over in Hardwick. He ran for state legislature a few times. He's also a woman's shooting trainer, gun trainer. But in any case, he's a landlord. He was actually my landlord at one point, and he still owns a couple of buildings in Hardwick. And this article, which is also on True North Reports, I can't remember the title right out, but if you look up landlords and whatnot, you'll find it. But what he was saying was he's having trouble, and he didn't single anybody out, but he's got a lot of people who live under him. He said he's having trouble. He's seeing that people are getting a lot of money from their assistants, and they're not going out and looking for jobs. And I got, right after that article published, maybe 2 or 3 hours later in the evening, I got a phone call from another friend of mine who wanted to be off the record, but he's another landlord in the Northeast Kingdom area, owns a lot of buildings and whatnot. And he said to me, he's like, Michael, thank you so much for writing this article. I cannot tell you enough how true this is. People are getting so much assistance now that he is having trouble to get the people who live for him and have to pay rent to him to, to go get work. And I've also interviewed, if you look at a lot of articles in True North Reports, you see stuff about the restaurant industry, the ski resort industry, other industries. It's a similar theme. The owners say they are having trouble finding people who want to work.
And I was looking in my notes because the article that I remember you writing was about landlords cannot, at the end of a contract, you cannot just not re-up it.
That's a proposal in Burlington, and I think it passed on town meeting day.
So whoever you rent to, you could have them potentially forever, unless there's something that you can point to that's destructive or a criminal act or something.
Yes, that was a city charter proposal for town meeting day this year in Burlington and possibly other Vermont communities, but I know it was for Burlington. I believe the voters approved it. Now, I also believe, and I stand corrected if I'm wrong about this, but I think the state legislature ultimately has to approve it.
Yes, that was a note I had. They had to approve it.
So, and I don't know if that's happened yet or if they've even looked at it yet, but I do remember that was something that the city of Burlington had on their city charter proposals, and they approved it. So I have a tenant, one tenant. Me and my wife and I bought a home that had enough area that we could rent out another part of it. It's worked out very nice, and we've been lucky enough to have a great tenant. But if for some reason something went horribly wrong, let's say she just wasn't working anymore, or could not work, or didn't want to work, or any number of problems that could go wrong, our leverage under the Burlington proposal would be not great.
Well, I have a couple of friends here in this area who are landlords, and they say, I mean, it's gotten a little bit better, but they can't get, when somebody does damage to your apartment, and good luck trying to get rid of them. It's really a big hurdle to climb over.
Right, and we've only got the one tenant. I can only imagine somebody like Larry in Hardwick who's got at least two big buildings, and the other guy, we're talking people with multiple families that they got to watch over, and it's just got to be tough.
And you have to be careful. I mean, you have to be careful about any background check. You certainly have to do this upfront and honest and balanced, and it doesn't matter about race or ethnicity or religion or whatever. But there's still an expected conduct of people, regardless, that you would hope they would follow. Because and Randy Brock, back on the unemployment thing, Randy Brock was talking about the impact to the employers. Because the employers pay the unemployment insurance, and if the unemployment insurance goes up, they have to pay that. So it's not like the state is on the hook for unemployment. Whatever they increase, the employer has to foot the bill. So there's a lot of concern from employers.
And if I may, I got the article in front of me. So this is Randy on the Senate floor talking about S10, the bill to have all this money go to unemployment insurance. He said virtually every employer group in the state who responded to this bill was put out, after this bill was put out, has raised considerable concern about the effect of it, and the effect both in terms of total cost and also on our economic recovery. So that this is Randy speaking to the Senate floor, I believe, less than a week ago.
He makes that's very true, and nobody thinks about the employer.
And everybody assumes that employers, because they have more money than the employee, they must be totally well off.
Right.
Maybe some of them are, but they are the ones who pay your money.
Yeah, and I don't know, somebody raised, I don't know if it was Randy, but somebody raised the issue of fraud. But I think the Department of Labor has really, I hope, it has gotten a handle on the fraud issue and has managed to find a few folks. Although what I understand is if they find you, they don't put you in jail.
They penalize you for a couple weeks.
They tell you you can't go in the system for a couple of weeks.
Right.
Big deal.
Yeah.
Which I don't think is the right way to handle that.
And I know what happens. I have a personal story. And so nobody will know who it was. Many years ago, I had a roommate in New York City, and we both worked the same job. It's a silly job. We were the bike taxi riders in New York City, the ones that go like through Central Park, and we got the bicycle and the little seat in the back, and we compete with the horse carriage people to try to ride them around and make money. It's a fun job. Some of the most fun I had out of college.
Oh, you would ride around tourists?
Yep. In between working for free for scrappy newspapers and just getting out of college.
Excellent.
But the crux of the story was we both applied for unemployment, or not unemployment, for public assistance, for food stamps, I think it was. He got them and I didn't because even though we had the exact same job, apparently I was more honest about the money I was making than he was. Or maybe he wasn't having as much luck as I was with getting riders on the bike. I don't know. But for some reason, even though we had the same job, and the lady on the phone, when I complained it to her at the social services office, she said, well, I guess your roommate just lied to us.
There you go. Welcome to, there's a lot of jobs that are not easy to track as far as income, so that's probably
so it
one
does
of them.
happen, and maybe that wasn't necessarily fraud, just one person being more honest than the other, but it still happens.
Okay, next article, number 3. This is one of my, I have to admit something terrible to people. Senator Pearson. He discussed his proposal to undermine the electoral college system for Vermont.
Right.
So it's S1.
And that was editorializing on our part.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think he said that.
He didn't actually say that.
So S122 supports the popular vote. Well, first, before we get into this, could you talk about the electoral college and what the popular vote is, because I think people get confused about that.
Well, a popular vote is just what it sounds like. It's the most people who vote in the country for either Biden or Trump or whoever the election may be. Pretty self-explanatory, which is not the determinant of the winner of the election in our presidential elections. I don't know if a lot of people realize that.
Which happened with Hillary Clinton, because she got the most popular votes.
Right, and I think also in 2000, it's happened a number of times, I think, with Gore. Anyway. And then the electoral college is you've got the electors from each state. So the way I understand it, and I hope I don't get this wrong, but every state gets a certain number of electors depending on, frankly, how big your state is and your population. So, California gets more than, Maine and so forth. I don't know, New York, I'm sure, gets a lot more than Vermont and so forth.
Oh, for sure.
But anyway, the idea of it back in the beginning, this has been since the inception of the country. As I understand it, and nobody's corrected me on that. So from the beginning, this is how our elections have been done, presidential elections have been done. And the idea of it in the beginning was that you would have people campaigning. This is what I was taught in school. Who knows if this was the whole truth, but what I was taught in school was the idea was that people would campaign in rural areas and not just in New York and Boston and Philadelphia and whatever the big cities were back then. They wanted people to go everywhere to campaign to get those electoral votes. Because I'm sure somebody better versed in history could explain it better than that. But the idea is they wanted to incentivize politicians to go everywhere and not just go to Boston and New York and campaign all day. I think there's a new purpose for it that maybe they didn't foresee, or maybe they did foresee this, and props to them. I do think there are concerns with our elections today. And I think when you have a system where the votes only count ultimately within each state, which is what you have with the electoral college system, you can mitigate voter fraud if it is happening. Maybe we believe it's happening, maybe we don't. But let's just hypothetically say for a moment that voter fraud really is happening. When you have the electoral college system, you can mitigate it to within each state. So if there's massive voter fraud, for example, in California, they can't just overwhelm the popular vote and take the election because they're only going to get those electoral, no matter how many votes they steal in one city or one state, they're only going to get those electoral, they're not going to. So I don't know if the founders of the country saw this coming or not, but to me, and I'm just saying as an observer, as a news writer, I feel like that this is a new and very important purpose for it to remain. It may even be more important now than it was when they found it.
In my mind, I always thought way back when that to cast the vote, we don't have the systems we have today, so that they would send people to Washington, on the horse.
That's probably part of it
on the horse, and they do it in person. But under the popular vote, and you had said we have 3 electoral votes, and if they actually did it by the way they calculated, I think we'd have like 1 or none because we're so small.
We're a very
so
small
the
state.
Founders gave us 3 to sort of balance.
Right, because they want people to come to Vermont and campaign instead of
and
just
give us some
over.
power in when we go to vote, because 3 isn't terrible, so we can cast our vote for 3. But under this scenario, it's very complicated because our electoral people that go to cast the vote, under this, they could actually dismiss however Vermont voted.
Yes.
And could vote with California, could vote with the popular vote, which upsets me to no end, because they should be there representing us.
That's right. So under Pearson's proposal, if Vermont's population voted, let's just use the last election for an example. So they voted for Biden. Let's just say the popular vote went to Trump. So Vermont's vote under Pearson's system would follow Trump, even though Vermonters voted for Biden.
Right, which is wrong.
Right. Well, and so that's why we were comfortable putting in the headline "Undermine the Electoral College System," even though he didn't say that. If you look at what he's proposing, there's no other way to.
Because the electors themselves are actually free to vote however they want. But for their own security and their own career campaign, whatever, they always vote the right way, the way.
Well, there are examples, as Pearson pointed out, and I'm not well versed enough to say how often it happens, but there are examples of electors going a different way, never to a point where it's impacted the outcome of an election.
No, right.
But I believe maybe they didn't agree with, maybe they thought the election was stolen, maybe they thought they just didn't like the candidate. Who knows? But for whatever reason, it's happened before at a small percentage rate.
Well, I always, for a long time, I supported the popular vote approach until I saw what happened with Hillary, and it dawned on me how wrong I was, because because she would have won because of California, California and New York.
Right.
The big states would have just overridden anything we did here.
Right. And there are folks out there, I'm not saying this is what I necessarily believe or True North believes, but Bev Harris, for example, of blackboxvoting.com, went on the record, she does not believe Hillary won even the popular vote in 2016. I believe her word was, she believes they stole at least 5 states for Hillary from Trump. He still won, of course. But I think that is an example of how if you took away the Electoral College, Hillary would have been president.
Yeah.
And whether you believe she stole those votes or not, that's what would have happened.
And people are listening, going, "We want Hillary," which, but if it was reversed and it was Trump that had the votes as Hillary did, you'd get Trump instead of Hillary. So it's just about being fair, not about parties.
Right.
Because I think our founding fathers were a smart bunch of guys, and they knew what the heck they were doing. And we at least, I think. That we have our 3 votes, but 2 of them should go to the majority, and 1 should go to the minority party, so that it would get. In this case, we'd have 2 Democrats and 1 Republican, and maybe it would get more Republicans to get up off the couch and vote, because when you went to the Electoral College, you'd have a voice. Because a lot of states do that. They divvy it up by percentage.
I didn't realize that.
So it's not just straight 3, 6, 5, whatever. It's a percentage of how many votes you got, and maybe even the progressive someday would have. So we'd have one Democrat, one progressive, and one Republican.
Yeah, that's an interesting look to it.
Because I think it would bring people out that they knew they would have if they had enough voters, they'd be at the Electoral College casting a vote.
Yeah.
We have to work on that.
Another note about this one from Pearson. So they're not going to pass this year, is what we heard from the committee.
Right.
But that's almost a moot point, because as Pearson told the committee, he basically said, and again, this is us paraphrasing, but he said this is only relevant for 2024. So whether they pass it this year or the next year or in 2023 doesn't really matter. This is for 2024. So people should not just lean back and forget about this just because the committee person said they might not pass it this year.
Because we were one of the states that joined this compact. There are now 15 states that joined it's called the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact.
Right.
And if you get, and I don't know what the number is, but if you get so many states, it's a done deal. It will happen just because of the sheer number of states.
Yeah.
And we voted for this a couple of years ago when I was in the legislature. And so I'm sorry I voted the way I did back then.
Well, whatever you voted for, according to Pearson, it still, right now as it's currently written, if this H10, or I'm sorry, not H10, S122, if this is not implemented, still Vermont, if the votes will go with how Vermont voted.
Right.
So that's the current system, whatever was voted on years ago, by Pearson's opinion, and I guess he wouldn't need the bill if it wasn't true.
Right.
But
Chris is a sharp guy.
Yep. So he believes that currently, if 2024 comes and goes, and the popular vote goes one way and Vermont goes the other way, Vermont's electoral votes must go with Vermont.
With Vermont, yeah.
So that's the status quo.
Because I don't know. I think, as you said about campaigning, and it's mostly because of the presidential vote, but sometimes. Because you have 3 votes, it's not much, but if they're doing New England, we would get a visit sometime.
Vermont.
Or they'd set up a headquarters here and have their people be here at least if they don't come. That we're not neglected.
Trump came to Vermont in 2016. I don't know if he came in 2020, probably not, but I know he came in 2016. I don't know if Biden came or not. Probably.
No, but they would have a strong presence of their staff and stuff.
Right.
So anyway, that was I made a mistake back then.
Oh well.
Bad. And one time, oh my God, I had the biggest fight with Senator Doyle.
Oh,
we were.
Oh, he was the one that
he wanted
the wheelchair.
He was totally against this, and I was arguing with him, and somebody walked into the room, and the guy backed out. He went, "Whoa," because I never would.
I used to wheel him around in the elevators and stuff.
Oh yeah, well, but he was a pretty sharp cookie before he got to the wheelchair thing. He was a force to be reckoned with. Okay, so next, number 4. This sounds like the Wheel of Fortune. Number 4.
Number 4. I'm scrolling to number 4.
Okay, the wealth tax pops up again in Senate Energy Committee as a way to fund Climate Council agenda. Oh, it's S44, submitted by Senator Anthony Polina.
Yep.
He thinks we need to raise money in order to make investment in climate change, ensuring that we meet our goal. This climate, they make such long names out of these things. The Climate Council agenda, it's... how many people are on this thing?
23.
23. They are they don't have to report to anybody.
Right.
They can do their own thing, and they've got authority to do it.
Yep.
And if you remember back at the Vermont Yankee, had a similar committee.
Oh,
and the legislature, because it was Vermont Yankee and more Republicans supported it, and the Democrats had, they hated this. They wanted to change it. They wanted to, and here we are because it's a topic that they're supportive of, that they love this committee. But it has no governance. Nobody, not even the governor, can say yes or no.
Well, he appointed one or two of the members, but that's all the leverage he had on it, as far as I know.
They'll outvote him.
And who knows if these appointments were... Anyway, that's all that he got to say in it, and I guess future governors as well.
Yeah.
And the way I've been told, and it sounds like, as you understand it as well, they're not accountable to anybody, well, and citizens can take legal action now against the state if these climate goals, this 90% renewable energy by 2050, and all the checkpoints in between now and then, if they're not met, apparently this bill gives your average citizen, I guess, your average anybody, can sue the state or make a class action lawsuit.
But so people know there is no money. They don't get money out of this. They just get the courts would say, shape it up and do it.
Right.
Because the people that file the lawsuit can't make any money off of this deal. Because if they don't make the goal, which I'm assuming they're not going to, you'd have how many thousands of people in Vermont suing and looking to get some money.
Right.
So that wouldn't be good. But it's really more to alert the courts that we haven't met our goals and that they should do something. But they also put on a income surcharge on the wealthiest 5%.
That's the proposal from Polina, 5%, or not an income surcharge on the wealthiest 5% of the earners in Vermont. And I guess he says the Joint Fiscal Office thinks this will raise $30 million a year. He wants to use this for, I guess, anything from electric cars to maybe investing in more community solar and wind. He doesn't really say too much specifically other than green agenda items.
Yeah. The only thing I can see that might actually change the tide is renewable energy and regenerative agriculture. The others, I don't know. First of all, I don't know what kind of impact Vermont could have on anything.
Right, we're a small state.
I mean, if we stood on our head and did absolutely everything we're supposed to, I don't think it would move anybody's needle.
Yeah. I always joke with people, I say we are actually on a giant spinning rock that's going around a giant fireball who is going through what knows galaxy and super stars and whatnot, and we're here on this little bitty Earth driving our cars, and we like to think that what we do is the beginning and end of everything, and it's just not.
Not in Vermont. I think maybe Texas or somebody like that's got a little edge on us, because then there's China with their air quality system coming right over us. So whatever we do gets wiped out by them, I do think. And also, the chair of the Energy Committee, Senator Bray, he's really into this, and the governor proposed $25 million for weatherization. And Bray said it should be at least $3.1 billion.
$3.1 billion.
Which
he did.
Is a little different philosophy.
And weatherization's a tricky one because I'm a homeowner. So I get it. We've done weatherization work, like simple stuff like patching up leaky holes and checking out our roof and things like that. But I think what they're trying to shuffle into this weatherization stuff is green technology. They call them cold climate heating pumps, which apparently these do serve a purpose in certain places in the country. They have a tough performance record despite the name of the product.
In cold?
In cold. They have a tough performance record in cold climates. You would think with a name like Cold Climate Heat Pump, they would be built for that. But I guess it's a funny technology, but it uses electricity. And the idea is it takes the air from outside your home and brings it in your home and somehow warms it up in the process. And I really couldn't explain it better than that, other than I know that when it comes to their cost and performance, so their cost per unit of energy to heat your home is not great. And when it gets to be really cold temperatures, like your teens or single digits or negatives, then they've been known to just fail or not perform very well. And so people end up relying on their oil heat anyway. And that's an example of something that gets piggybacked into this, like, weatherization, that sounds great. What could be wrong with weatherization? But then he actually said, I think in the interview, because I interviewed Chris Bray for this article, and he said to me, I think he had mentioned solar, like rooftop solar is like one of the things. And I'm like, is that really part of insulating your home? I guess it could help, but it's another example of something that sounds like a great idea, and then you see a lot of things piggybacked on it, where you go,
I think the solar's gotten much cheaper,
yeah,
though, over the years, because when it first came to our attention, it was a killer. I mean, we couldn't even think about it.
Right.
But as it's gotten down, and then there are so many subsidies that
right. That's what you have to think about. Is like there's what the utility tells you you're paying for it, which is probably still more than you should be.
Right.
But what else are they getting before they charge you? Because that could be, your taxpayer money.
Right. Yeah, but at some point there were incentives for us. But then I think over the years things have changed a little bit. But we were thinking about it at one point because we have a lot of wind where we live just because of the way.
The grid, right? Power went out at the State House just the other day.
Yeah, it did.
I was writing an article, and they lost power and they didn't get the vote. So.
Yeah, my sister's house got caught up in that too, but it didn't last very long.
Yeah.
All right, Article 5.
Article 5, yep.
So during the Montpelier visit, there was a representative from Turning Point USA.
Yeah, that's right.
And but I'm assuming it's not the Turning Point drug rehab that we have here in Vermont. This is a conservative organization, I'm assuming, given that they came to talk to young people about how to stand up to aggressive tactics from the left. So
yes, that's what she talked about.
Yeah. Were you there?
I was. Yep, I got to meet Isabel Brown. She is. I describe her as a media figure. So basically, this lady, she's in her young 30s. She went to college to become, I think, a med student or in the medical field. There might have been one or two other things she was studying, but anyway, she was basically. She went to college right around after the 2016 election. So this is right after Trump got in.
Right.
And she got to see, I think it was right around her first classes, she got to see the professors that were weeping in front of the class.
Right,
the professors that were treating conservatives differently when they would grade their papers based on what they wrote, not based on whether they got the assignment right or wrong, but whether they agreed with their
philosophy.
Answer. So she was seeing all that up front, and she's like, she said at the beginning of her speech something along the lines of, "I never imagined myself being a conservative, public speaker or activist or anything like that." She's like, "I just wanted to go to school to learn about medicine and law and all this other stuff."
Good
and she was so shocked that she ended up finding Turning Point USA. And it's really a success story for her because the university was
Colorado
State University, and she said by the time she graduated, she had a legitimate conservative movement on the campus that could protect, for lack of a better phrase, kind of protect each other.
This surprised me. In the article, you said that she said that Generation Z, or is it X?
It's so confusing. X was the 1990s, I think.
Yeah, this is the newer generation.
So where was Generation Y?
She said is the most conservative of any prior generations and sort of against the cancel culture.
Yes, and
which I found very interesting.
I do too. I think we could easily do a whole show just on this topic. This is really fascinating to me as well. And I've noticed this before because I used to cover the high school up in Hardwick. And I would hear activist groups for some of the more liberal-leaning causes complain that they were getting resistance in the classrooms from students who were like, "We're not going to have this." It was something about a guy had come in to talk about gun control or gun safety from like a restrict the Second Amendment perspective. This was not like a...
Oh, and they pushed back?
The guy was complaining that the students were pushing back and looking at their cell phones and pulling up articles. And I thought to myself, this is the first generation that can pick up a cell phone, preferably not in the middle class, but anyway, in any case, on the fly, and immediately pull up information to question their teachers.
Right.
And maybe that's a good thing. We pick on technology a lot, saying how horrible it is. Maybe this is like a silver lining. And I'm sure there's other reasons for it. But it was so fascinating to hear her talk about that this new generation coming up, when they do polls and they ask them questions, they're very fiscally conservative, they're very skeptical about taking on debt. I guess I would like to think, and I'm not sure, but I would like to think they're maybe a little bit more skeptical of the mainstream media than the prior generation. and what's interesting is, I can't remember who said it first, but they say culture and politics, they can be moving different directions, but they say politics will always eventually follow the culture. I don't.
Well, that's something to think about.
So, and I've always found that fascinating, and I wonder if it might be true, because if culture is moving one way, maybe that does pull politics with it. You would think eventually.
Well,
anyway.
I mean, if everybody's changing their mind about something,
Right, right.
If we do change politics
Yeah.
with our thinking, one would hope.
You would hope so anyway.
Because apparently with this Generation Z, they're resisting things like Dr.
Cancel
Seuss
culture.
and the cancel culture about Dr. Seuss.
Yep.
And I just heard something coming here to the studio tonight about somebody complaining about some cartoon. I'm like, oh, come on. But
I read Dr. Seuss almost every night to my children. And what's so ironic to me, is some of the books, most of them really, like Sneetches on Beaches. Do you remember that one?
I know
the
them
whole
all.
theme is social justice, and like the ones have stars on them and the ones don't. And at the end, they figure out that they're all the same, even though some have stars and some don't. And I'm thinking, this is like, you would think if you were a social justice person, this would be like your number one front and center.
Right.
Like, hey, everybody, read this one.
Right, memorize it, kids.
You know, read it twice. Yeah. But for some reason, I can only imagine how Dr. Seuss somehow got looped in all this stuff.
Well,
even
I just find the reaction, because it was only two or three books that they focused on.
Right.
And so, which means to me that the others must have been okay. But why do you want to cancel the Dr. Seuss shows and their costumes and
and Huck Finn now they're going after. We're also reading Huck Finn to my children.
And that's bad now too.
So my kids love Huck Finn. They
love. Yes, for sure.
Well, my youngest one gets scared. I have three now, but my 5-year-old gets scared, as he probably too old for him. But we're reading the unabridged version, like the original version of Huck Finn.
Great.
And my older son loves it. He just thinks it's the greatest thing.
Cool.
And I can't imagine anybody wanting to cancel it.
Just wait, they'll change it. Yeah, because I think kids love to be read to. I mean.
Yeah.
They just love it because they use their imagination to think about the pictures and stuff. So, all right, number 6 on the hit parade. This is a controversial bill introduced by Representative Hal Colson, which is H-227. And it allows newly arrived non-citizens to vote instantly. This is in Winooski. And the pushback is that there's a potential to allow out-of-towners to arrive and vote, but they have to prove that they are a legal resident, which may be the stumbling point here. But they, they could do it fairly quickly and be able to vote. And the concern is that that elections with state funding, there's a constitutional issue.
Right, because so the idea is Winooski wants to, and I believe voted affirmatively on town meeting day this year, to allow non-citizens to vote as long as they can prove they're a resident of the town or city, and I guess, which is an interesting question, because there was an interaction in the committee. This was the this was the House of Representatives House Education Committee. So this is about a week ago. Representative Woodman Page from Newport put forth a question about this bill to Representative Hal Colston. And he said, so Madam Speaker, addressing the chamber, you could actually arrive in Winooski today and vote tomorrow, ? And then Colston said, if you make Winooski your home and that's what you attest to, yes. So, and then,
there you go. Now Montpelier's doing it if you own land.
Okay.
So you've got a stake in the community. I have a little less problem with that than this bill, because if you've invested in your house or you've invested in your land, and so what happens to the roads, what happens to
it matters.
I mean,
to
that
you.
means that I can almost see that, because at first I thought, what are they doing? But
and we're coming off a federal election where a lot of Republicans, depending on the poll, half to 2/3 of them are skeptical of what just happened there. So if you got bills like this passing where you get people allowed to show up the day before and then say, I live here, and maybe they do have proof that they live there, it would be nice to know that was enforced, because that would be a game changer, you would think. But What's to say you're not just showing up at a friend's house, you park your bags on their bed, and go to the clerk's house and say, this is my address, you know?
Yeah, you could get a telephone bill, and there you are.
Right. Yeah. So you have to wonder, are we tiptoeing on a fine line here between letting people who maybe have a stake in things vote versus inviting trouble?
Okay. So your article number 7, you covered a whole lot of issues in this one article.
Yeah.
And the one that I think you were interested
this is a news roundup.
was the youth council, and we could social justice youth council. And it also had no firearms in hospitals.
Yeah.
The mask rebellion.
Yeah.
And the free school lunches for everyone. And I thought, what? But that's my own.
This was a news roundup I did a couple weeks ago, so that's why it covers a couple different things. Social justice themed youth council, that is H293. House Committee on Government Operations was working on this, and this would create a council that would provide, quote, and I think this is from the language of the bill, to advice on policies that impact young persons in Vermont. Now that sounds totally innocent, totally great. Who doesn't want to hear from their children? But if you read the text of the bill, it says here, focus on prioritizing diversity and inclusion, including characteristics such as county of residence, gender identity, racial identity, disabilities, age, and other characteristics identified by the applicants. So, so this was language on the people they would find to be a part of this council. So they want the people who apply to be on this council to put gender identity and racial identity as like their front priorities for it. And the reason we decided to highlight this in our news roundup is just because here's another example of a government-initiated program where you got young people talking about climate and racial justice and stuff, which on the surface, I guess it sounds fine, but as we know, sometimes I don't know.
Yeah, no, I worry only because of the level of education that they have an understanding of what social justice is.
Right.
I mean,
Black Lives Matter, for instance. Yeah. I think the average Black Lives Matter person is nothing but great intentions, but they at the top of Black Lives Matter, they have a lot of money swimming around from the name George Soros always seems to come to mind. Some of these large institutions that probably have their own agendas. I can't think of another word for it.
I think the original intent was good.
Right, the original intent is there.
And I support that because I went to a school that was flying the Black Lives Matter flag, and the teacher told me that they fly the flag. That's hard to say, they fly the flag. They fly the flag to show people that they're safe here and that it's a welcoming environment. And I said, if everyone looks at that, like the LGBTQ and other folks that may be concerned about being welcomed, if that's all-encompassing, then good. Right. That's a good thing because.
But would they be all-encompassing to a Trump supporter or a conservative? I think that's a quick
probably
question.
Probably not anymore. Used to be, but and then they had the free lunch school. I just object to this.
Right.
I mean,
Well, they don't tailor it by income. They're not tailoring it by income. You would think that would be the thing to do.
Of course, but they should have money for kids who need it and can't afford it. And they don't. I think the stories we've heard about kids being shut down because they didn't have the money, that is outrageous.
Right, and that
so if they're willing to pay for everyone, then they should be willing to put a bucket of money aside for the kid who needs it.
Yeah.
I had somebody in my family. She lost her job, and she had her kids take advantage of the free lunch, and then when she got her job. She went back to paying, and I said, that's what it's supposed to be about. I'm not supposed to foot the bill for people who can afford it.
Right, and that's how it's currently written,
I don't agree with that. I don't agree you should shame the kids who have to have the free lunches. Maybe that's one of the reasons they're doing it.
Oh, well.
So that nobody knows who can or can't afford it. But there's got to be a better way to do this.
Right.
So, You don't embarrass a child.
Maybe if there was a way to do it outside of the lunchroom, where
Right.
just the parents could
Right.
get like a stipend, and then way everybody can bring their money into school, but
Right.
no, the kids don't have to face
Yeah,
who's
no,
got.
I'm
the
sure there's a
program or
lot
not.
of things that go on, and they certainly shouldn't refuse a kid lunch if they don't have the money. That is
Right.
That's
I
just
can't
wrong.
imagine that.
That's
Yeah.
wrong. And then
I even remember when I forgot my lunch money when I was a kid. They always hooked me up.
I know that was a big deal.
Yeah.
I used to bring my lunch, but it was eaten by 10 o'clock every day, and then I didn't.
Yeah.
I used
I
to
had
do that.
it was $1.25 in an envelope. I don't even know why I needed an envelope for that, but I did.
Because you wouldn't lose it.
So-
There you go. So then there's a bill that says there's no firearms in hospitals, but I guess apparently somebody wanted to
Yes.
expand that to other
Yes, this was
areas, and they said no.
yes, no guns allowed in hospitals. S30. This bill, in its original intent, was to include it to all public places, all I guess government or public places, and then it got watered down to just hospitals. And what we point out, what the gun owners people from the gun owners of Vermont folks have pointed out to me was. Currently, already, any place, public or private, if their management chooses so, can put a sign that says no guns allowed.
Right.
And if you violate it, you can be prosecuted with a felony trespassing charge.
Right.
But what this bill would do was, according to the gun expert folks, they said, now if you came in and let's say you forgot you had your gun on you, or you were running to the hospital, an emergency from a hunting accident, and let's say you accidentally came in with a gun, you could still possibly get in big trouble. That was the interpretation of the gun owners, folks.
Have we ever had any trouble in hospitals? I wonder
I don't
why
know that we have. It almost sounds like a problem looking for a solution.
Yeah, because I don't even nationwide, I don't ever
Right.
remember.
I mean, they're
somebody-
pretty secure already. Hospital is one of those places where you kind of expect, not
Only on the
so-
crime shows on TV do they come into the hospital
right.
and blast away their enemy.
Right.
So
Yep.
anyway, I'm going to may skip around a little bit because we only have 6 minutes.
Okay,
And I
yep.
wanted to talk about something that when I was in the legislature, these people were working on this in Essex town with Essex Junction, the merger. They have worked on this for like 10, 15 years, I swear.
Essex Town and Essex City.
Essex Junction, they want to
Essex-
merge them. And
Municipally merge 'em,
Yeah,
yeah.
and they lost by 17 votes.
Okay.
But, oh, okay. Oh, that was the clerk lost by 4 votes. They have, do you have any feeling for why that lost again? They just identity or?
Yeah, that's one of the ones I didn't follow too closely at True North, but I did hear about it. And to be honest, I didn't know that was something towns could do. I'm still young.
Oh, yeah, they share some support and they have their own support. I mean, they're not big, so they've got a municipal manager could certainly manage both.
Right.
Both
so then they would
the-
become one community then.
Right,
Okay,
yeah.
so there'd be no more two separate.
No.
Okay.
But they have tried. I was in committee one time when they both representatives from both entities came in, and whoa.
They didn't want to do it.
They didn't want to
disagreed?
do it.
Oh, they didn't want to do it.
And that was 10 years ago. So here we are again. And
I
obviously,
wonder why. That's one I'd be curious to learn more about. I don't know a whole lot about why they want to do that, and I'm sure there's probably a good reason for it, but maybe they're.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to know because I would assume it's identity that they
Could
like
be.
their identity. They like their separate schools. They like.
Yeah.
But there is savings to be had because
that makes
it's not.
sense.
It's not that there's not that many people involved here.
Right. Larger economy of scale and governments can, in theory, doesn't always work that way, but in theory, it should.
Yeah. So
should work.
I was surprised when I saw that. I went, when are they going to either do it or give it up? Because or move on.
That'll be an interesting one to watch then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know. You want to talk in 4 minutes?
Let's see. Maybe I'll just pick one.
How about your mask thing?
Oh, yep.
It says one of your articles was Vermont could miss out on economic opportunities as other
yes.
states open up, like Florida's doing.
Yes,
The gangbusters.
Yes. So states that are opening are. And this was, 2 or 3 weeks ago now, so it could be more so today. states that are reopening quicker are seeing businesses flock
For
to
sure.
them.
And they're coming into Florida. The
They're
businesses.
coming into Florida from California.
Yeah.
I don't know that businesses are leaving Vermont specifically for this purpose yet, but I would have to imagine to some extent it's happening from every state.
Yeah.
If you're a business and you can't open up, like the restaurants in Vermont, for example, I'm not sure if it's 50 or 75%, but they're not allowed to be 100%, is my understanding, and they still have to follow the mask and the contact tracing, and now there's vaccines. If you have a choice to go to another state where they're just letting you be and run your business like normal,
Right.
you might...
Low taxes, there's a concept.
Right. Or a ski resort, for example, down in 2 states below us, so I guess we're talking Connecticut, right?
Yep.
They changed their policies as well, and I can't remember off the top of my head exactly what it was, but they're looser on the mask and the quarantining and all that stuff. And so now let's say you're a New Yorker and you want to go on your ski vacation, and you could go to Connecticut where you can just kind of be normal, or you could go to Vermont where you got to go do a 2-week quarantine and get a shot and wear a mask and stand away from everybody. Which one are you going to go to?
Well, exactly. But I wonder
know?
how many people...
Yeah.
I mean, do we have the quarantine police out there? Are people out?
I don't think there's any enforcement for that
No.
whatsoever.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure there is virtually no enforcement, which makes all this talk about, well, who gets the vaccine and who doesn't get the vaccine. Is it really matter unless you're going to have a card that people wear or a tattoo or something? Yeah. Nobody's going to go for that. Yeah. I mean, they're trying to propose that in Europe right now, like where you'll have like a special card or something to go around. And the backlash is tremendous. I have a feeling it's not going to go anywhere.
I think it reminds people of pre-war days when you were walking around to show your papers.
Right, and interestingly enough, a Holocaust survivor was one of the latest persons to make headlines speaking out on the COVID restrictions. I can't remember if she's in Europe or the United States, but this lady's 96 years old, and she was comparing what she's seeing today to pre-war Nazi Germany.
Well, I think that's what's getting people to think about, because you have to show your papers, really.
Right. So, but in any case, I think that whatever you believe about the virus, the fact of the matter is businesses are looking at the states that are opening, and they're saying, ooh, I can go here and have this, or I can stay here and be,
I think July is a long time for a struggling business.
Yeah.
If they're saying July 4th.
Is that what they're saying? They got to wait for it now?
That was Biden said that. And he said today that for these states that are doing away with the masks, he said he really, really would encourage them to rethink that, because that is the way that this stuff spreads, or so they say. So, but I think they also say children do not transmit, like school kids. They don't transmit amongst themselves, which is very interesting.
Yeah, and I always point people to, when it comes to COVID, I did an article on the death certificates. Now this was of the first 59 deaths, so anything after that, I have a strong feeling it follows this pattern, but for sake of transparency, this is the first 59 deaths of COVID in Vermont. The average age of death, I think, was either 77 or 78. They averaged, I think it was 2 or 2.5 what we call comorbidities, and these are things like obesity and heart disease. These are not just like having a cold when you die, and so the reason I keep pointing people to that report is I say you got to put it in perspective. You can have all the headlines about cases and this and that, but if the death certificate data continues to show that it's only young, I mean, not only young, only old people with 1 or 2 or existing conditions, that needs to be kept in perspective. And
I'm one of those old people, so thanks for mentioning 77. Michael, we really appreciate you joining us. This went a fast hour. Thank you all for tuning in. We'll see you next week, and keep listening beyond the sound bites.